What's up, guys? Welcome back to the study. Good to have you here. Today, amazing topics. Gonna love it, I promise. Today's gonna be a little bit different. Um, I actually have Miles with me today. So
Yo,
this is gonna be good. I brought
what's
him on board.
up? Wait, why is it different? Why isn't this the new normal?
'Cause I don't think you're gonna be here every time.
It's probably true.
Probably facts, but love you anyways, dude. Um, unless you want, you can. I don't care.
We'll find out together.
We'll find out together what we'll do. But anyways, we're gonna move some of this stuff over here. Cool. So today, personality ethic versus character ethic. This is big stuff. Last time we talked about deep-rooted problems and painful problems. They're actually really valid. Um, then Stephen Covey goes into personality and character ethics and differentiates between the two of them, and goes into a little bit deeper into like what the definition of success actually is, and how are you measuring that. Super interesting stuff. Anything you want to add to that, Miles?
Yeah, I just think it gets a little confusing because in the dating world, you hear people say all the time, like, well, what do you think matters more, looks or personality? And kind of a while back, kind of deep down, I realized that there's something missing even from that. That, yeah, you can make an argument that looks and personality, like maybe one's more important than the other. But in reality, like your character is the fundamental of those. So, how honest you are, how much integrity you have, how grateful you are, that's character. Whereas personality is maybe how introverted you are. It's like an introvert, extrovert, you can't really argue which one's better. You could prefer one, but you could always say that integrity wins every time. You see what I'm saying there?
No, it makes a lot of sense, dude. It's like your foundation for who you are instead of just like a talent or ability that you have.
Yeah, or just, yeah.
That's cool. Okay, let's dive into the book. So Stephen Covey starts out saying, at the same time, in addition to my research on perception, I was also deeply immersed in an in-depth study of the success literature published in the United States in 1776. I was reading or scanning literally hundreds of books, articles, and essays in fields such as self-improvement, popular psychology, and self-help. At my fingertips was the sum and substance of what a free and democratic people considered to be the keys to successful living. Pretty powerful to have a whole, like probably the most successful nation's whole library of literature on what they define success as. It's a lot of stuff. So I'm grateful that Stephen Covey organized that, so I don't have to. So
Yeah.
that's what this book talks about, which is why it's so impactful. But going on, it says, as my study took me back through 200 years of writing about success, I noticed a startling pattern emerging in the content of the literature. Because of our own pain, and because of similar pain I had seen in the lives and because of similar pain I had seen in the lives and relationships of many people I had worked with through the years, I began to feel more and more that much of the success literature of the past 50 years was superficial. It was filled with social image consciousness techniques and quick fixes, or like shortcuts, essentially, is what he's saying here. Going back to the reading, with social band-aids and aspirin that addressed acute problems and sometimes even appeared to solve them temporarily, but left the underlying chronic problems untouched to fester and resurface time and again. This reminds me of like, we'll go into this a little bit further in a further episode, but the way we see the problem is the problem. We can try and fix our problems like all we want, but as long as we see it the wrong way, we're never going to actually make quantum leaps of improvement in fixing the problem. And so it's like, he's saying there are no shortcuts. There are no like acute band-aid fixes or like quick fixes or techniques. Like, you really have to get to the deep motivations. Anything you want to add, dude?
Yeah, it's what you said about the way we see the problem is the problem. If you don't see the problem the right way, then you're never going to get to the root of it, right? Because I just think the Band-Aid fix is a very good imagery for that, very good comparison. Because, well, what a Band-Aid does is it just, like, stops what you see. If you have a cut and it's just bleeding, put a Band-Aid on it, it's like, sure, that's going to help, but what's the root of the problem? Well, maybe you're, like, stabbing yourself. I don't know. Is a Band-Aid really going to stop that? No. It's a little bit of a weird analogy, but
a morbid one, but I get your picture.
you know me. Right.
No, that's cool.
That's what you get for bringing me on.
I love it. I'm glad you're here, Miles. I'm grateful.
Cool.
Continuing on, he says, in stark contrast to almost all of the literature in the first 150 years or so, focused on what could be called the character ethic as the foundation of success. Things like integrity, humility, fidelity, temperance, courage, justice, patience, industry, simplicity, modesty, and the golden rule. Benjamin Franklin's autobiography is representative of that literature. It is basically the story of one man's effort to integrate certain principles and habits deep within his nature. When I read that, I think of deep within his nature. Like, there is no thought of another way of handling these problems. Like integrity and patience and justice and simplicity and modesty, the golden rule, like those are like what you govern your life by. It's almost like your personal constitution, and like you don't even like think about trying to do like techniques or take shortcuts. Like, they're so deeply embedded into who you are, and because they like win every time, and you're always gonna pick patience over impatience or integrity over disloyalty. You know, like they're just like self-evident. They're like, you can't argue against them. Like, they just work because they're principles. And so like by integrating them so deeply into your nature, there is no thought of another way of doing things. Like, that's just how you do it because it works and it's principles. And it takes out a lot of like confusion or like stress or fear.
Just think about the appeal of the personality ethic, right? If you're focusing on getting the desired results, but not necessarily in the right way. For example, if your goal is to get people to like you, and that's what you're so focused on, you might look up some techniques of, well, how long to smile, how slowly to move your body, how open to keep your body language.
One-liners, what words to say.
One-liners. I don't even want to say pickup lines because everyone knows those don't work. But that's certainly, I would argue, a lot easier than looking within yourself and recognizing that there's a character flaw and then working on that. Do you know how long it takes to fix your character?
Like forever, dude. It takes forever.
It takes forever. It's painful. Well, why would you do that if your only concern was the result itself, right? Not about refining yourself and your character. But the funny part is, if you focus on your character primarily, then you will get a better outward result than any amount of just focusing on the outward result, right? There's no better way to get the best and most abundant outward results than focusing on the most fundamental inward characteristics that set the foundation for everything else.
Sounds like the byproduct paradigm. By not focusing on what you want, you get what you want.
But then it's kind of interesting because now you want the byproduct, but what you want more than anything is to fix what's within.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
In a sense, you are getting still what you want.
You are. You're shifting your definition of success to be more like, the more patient I am, the more integrous I am, the more grateful I am. That's the true win. rather than, oh, I just get what I wanted out of that situation. I made a little bit more money.
And of course, like, you could measure that by the outward successes. It's a very good measurement. Like, maybe some people say, well, I didn't get the outward success that I wanted, but at least I tried, or at least I improved as a person. Well, did you?
Who knows?
Maybe. Who knows?
You tell us.
So I'm not saying that a lack of outward success always means that you weren't successful in changing your character, but in my opinion, it could be used as a very good measurement. Often.
That's cool. Dang. Okay. Reading on here, it says, the character ethic taught that there are basic principles of effective living, and that people can only experience true success and enduring happiness as they learn and integrate these principles into their basic character. It's kind of what we were just talking about integrating these principles into their basic character. But shortly after World War I, the basic view of success shifted from the character ethic to what we might call the personality ethic. Success became more a function of personality, of public image, of attitudes and behaviors, skills and techniques that lubricate the processes of human interaction. This personality ethic essentially took two paths. One was human and public relations techniques, and the other was positive mental attitude. Some of this philosophy was expressed in inspiring and sometimes valid maxims, such as, your attitude determines your altitude. Smiling wins more friends than frowning. And whatever the mind of man can achieve and believe, whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. So this is saying essentially is like the personality ethic brought in this different definition of success, of like, I love how he says that lubricate the processes of human interaction. It's like trying to get the joy of a solid relationship or solid friendship without actually putting in the work. Like trying to get the fruits of a tree without actually taking time to like water it and nurture it and dig about it and prune it. And like you're almost trying to take like this like shortcut by using human and public relations techniques, but then also like a positive mental attitude. Like those two things are like the personality, I think, where like you're essentially just trying to take a shortcut instead of looking deep within yourself at like what you can actually do better to integrate principles better into your life.
Spitting facts.
Cool. Let's go on. Other parts of the personality approach were clearly manipulative, even deceptive, encouraging people to use techniques to get other people to like them, or to fake interest in the hobbies of others to get out of them what they wanted, or to use the power look, or to intimidate their way through life. Some of this literature acknowledged character as an ingredient of success, but tended to compartmentalize it rather than recognize it as a foundational and catalytic. Reference to the character ethic became mostly lip service. The basic thrust was quick fix influence techniques, power strategies, communication skills, and positive attitudes. This is really cool. What I get from this is like it's amazing how much more effective you can be if your paradigm is what are you giving of this situation? How are you giving of yourself to bless lives of others instead of focusing on what can I get from others? And so the personality ethic derives itself from this paradigm of like, oh, I'm just trying to get things from people. And so, yeah, you're going to make like the shortest route. Like that is the obvious answer if that's your paradigm, is trying to get things from other people. But if you're truly trying to like make a contribution to the world and truly change things and make things different in your community, in your family life, in your own life, in your workspace, like you really need to take a deeper look into who you are as a person, into like your character. Like techniques alone isn't going to create quantum changes of improvement. Like it's just not. You can't take these shortcuts with humans. Like we're very complex beings, and so it just like isn't like. But when you focus on giving of yourself, then you start to like understand your strengths and and like your like the principles you integrate into your life to be able to create a long lasting legacy. Hope that makes sense. But
I think you hit the nail on the head pretty well. You said the paradigm was what can you give rather than what can I get. It's mentioned here that some people did mention the character ethic, but mostly as lip service, like mostly just to say it. But the fundamental paradigm didn't change. The paradigm probably was still what can I get rather what can I give. So it didn't matter that they mentioned a couple things about the character ethic. The end result was still the same. They only suggested quick fixes, and the processes didn't actually do much to change your character. Because if you're thinking about yourself, then you're only focusing on the one outward result that you're trying to achieve. Then, well, what's the natural behavior from that? Well, you quickly fix it with the Band-Aid. But then what are the other areas of your life where that character flaw is manifesting itself? How is that affecting other people? What other outward results that maybe you don't realize right now, what is it yielding? But if you're thinking about others, then you gradually gain this understanding that your character affects the way you do everything, every aspect of your life. And every single one of those aspects influences and affects others. So the logical conclusion is to fix yourself, to fix the character. So the difference between the character ethic and the personality ethic, like if you want to shift from one to the other, is changing your view on what your purpose is. Is it for others or is it for yourself? Then the natural actions will just follow.
dude, that's actually way powerful because it's like how you do anything is how you do everything. And so if you're trying to get something out of one scenario, it's most likely how you're going to act in all areas of your life. That's pretty cool, actually. Stephen Covey goes into actually a story here that illustrates this very, very well. It ties in the story we talked about in last episode. So if you don't remember that story, go back and listen to the previous one. But he says here, this personality ethic, I began to realize, was the subconscious source of the solutions Sandra and I were attempting to use with our son. So, like, when they were trying to fix their son, it was like, yeah, it was the natural actions that they had through using the personality ethic. It just wasn't like an effective paradigm. And so he goes on to say, as I thought more deeply about the difference between the personality and character ethics, I realized that Sandra and I had been getting social mileage out of our children's good behavior. And in our eyes, this son simply didn't measure up. Our image of ourselves and our role as good, caring parents was even deeper than our image of our son, and perhaps influenced it. There was a lot more wrapped up in the way we were seeing and handling the problem than our concern for our son's welfare. So, like, as parents, if your son's struggling, like, yeah, you like love them, you like want to help them out and stuff, but at the same time, he realized that him and his wife's deeper motives were that they didn't feel like they weren't getting social mileage out of their children's good behavior. So because their child wasn't producing the way that society thought he should be, they felt like their role as parents, like that they weren't being good parents, or that like people would perceive them as not being good parents. And so that influenced how they saw their son, would influence like how they acted. And so we're going to talk about like the shift that they made, and it's like really, really, really powerful. But the problem is the way they were seeing the problem, because they're looking through a lens of the personality ethic rather than the character ethic.
Cool. As Sandra and I talked, we became painfully aware of this powerful influence of our own character and motives, and of our perception of him. We knew that social comparison motives were out of harmony with our deeper values and could lead to conditional love and eventually to our son's lessened sense of self-worth. So we determined to focus on our efforts on us, not on our techniques, but on our deepest motives and our perception of him. Instead of trying to change him, we tried to stand apart, to separate us from him, and to sense his identity, his individuality, separateness, and worth. So, interesting, like, their values were to love their son, but their actions were saying that they cared more about their self-image than for him. So did they actually love him as much as they thought they did? Maybe they just have this desire to love him, but then they realized that what they were doing leads to conditional love. So, and they obviously, from seeing that this is a problem, they value unconditional love and loving their son as much as possible. Problem was they weren't doing that. And so by recognizing that problem, changing their view on their son, now their capacity to love him more will increase.
So essentially they loved themselves more than their son. And that caused the problems. That caused them to have low self-esteem because it was conditional love.
Yeah.
So by separating that and saying, independent of what you do, we're going to love you and to affirm you and to help you feel like you're worthy and like you're adequate. That's really cool. So he continues on here. Through deep thought and the exercise of faith and prayer, we began to see our son in terms of his own uniqueness. So now they're looking through a different frame of reference. He continues on saying, we saw within him layers and layers of potential that would be realized at his own pace and speed. We decided to relax and get out of his way and let his own personality emerge. We saw our natural role as being to affirm, enjoy, and value him. We also conscientiously worked on our motives and cultivated internal sources of security so that our own feelings of worth were not dependent on our children's quote-unquote acceptable behavior. That's really cool. I like how they stood apart and they looked at the situation from a different frame of reference and then began to see layers and layers of potential within him instead of problems. So they saw opportunities instead of what was going wrong. And then from that they saw that their perception of their natural role as parents completely shifted. And instead of trying to interject themselves into his life every second to try and help him out, they actually just got out of his way and just let him go loose.
I also like how the paragraph starts. It says, through deep thought and the exercise of faith and prayer. Faith, I think of, you don't have a full knowledge of something, but you have a lot of trust
That it works.
Yeah. And so deep thought, obviously they were questioning their own techniques. They were questioning their viewpoints. That takes a lot of courage, humility, a lot of good characteristics in order to question that. And so we already see the character ethic being put into play here. The character ethic is necessary in order to have the courage to change your view.
To be influenced.
Right. And character ethic, strong character ethic enables you to change your viewpoint, which is the only effective way to change the way you treat other people.
Dang, dude, that's powerful. It's like character ethic is the way to essentially win in life.
Right.
It's the only effective way to do it.
If you're not changing your character, then
You're losing.
it's not effective. Right.
You're bleeding capital.
You're bleeding capital.
I love that. Cool. So he continues on saying, as we loosened up our old perception of our son and developed value-based motives, new feelings began to emerge. We found ourselves enjoying him instead of comparing or judging him. We stopped trying to clone him in our own image or measure him against social expectations. We stopped trying to kindly, positively manipulate him into an acceptable social mold. Because we saw him as fundamentally adequate and able to cope with life, We've stopped protecting him against the ridicule of others. So yeah, they just like got out of his way, and they essentially had this new paradigm of like, dude, you're fine, like you're good, like you don't need our help to be protected. Like we actually enjoy being around you because now we're not like so worried about comparing you or judging you. Like we just love you for who you are, and we value the differences that you bring to this family and to our relationship. And so like we're gonna stop trying to like mold you to what we think you should be and just let you be you and just like love you and affirm you and value you. And that like created these feelings of like joy within them that I like actually enjoyed being with him now, instead of viewing it as like a problem that they needed to fix.
Yeah. Off of that, you were talking about this as well, but the sentence, "We found ourselves enjoying him instead of comparing or judging him," implies two things. Number one, they weren't enjoying him before. And instead, as it says in that sentence, they were comparing and judging instead of enjoying. So the first thing it's implying is that they weren't enjoying him before. And number two, it says we found ourselves enjoying him. Whereas like before they knew it, all of a sudden they were enjoying him. Now imagine this. Parents not enjoying their kids. And they want to enjoy their kids, but maybe they're stuck in the situation that Stephen and his wife were stuck in before, where they're judging their son, they're trying to encourage him, nothing's working, but they're not enjoying him. Imagine going up to those parents and saying, "Well, why don't you just choose to enjoy him?" They'll say, "What? That's not something I can control, idiot." But we clearly see here that they literally just chose to enjoy him. And it's not just, I choose to enjoy him. It's, well, they chose to refine their character. Over time, use that to take a leap of faith forward, to question their own views, question their own techniques. And in doing that very thorough fixing the root of the problem, before they knew it, now they were enjoying him, and it was just a natural byproduct of all that work and faith that they did before. So they did choose to start enjoying him, but it's not in the way that most people would expect to choose to enjoy.
Like that choice was not an event. That choice was a process, a journey.
Choice was a process. And
it took
it
time,
involved,
day after day.
Right. Focusing on the right thing, and then now the choice doesn't even seem like a choice. It's just what happens naturally. You just enjoy them. That's just what you do.
Right. That's what happens when you view someone like that.
Right. Your views, your character.
When you love them unconditionally, that's what happens.
Right. So everything's a choice. Remember that, kids.
That's facts. That is facts. Everything is a choice. Cool. So let's see what happens to him now. He goes on and says he had been nurtured on this protection, so he went through some withdrawal pains, which he expressed and which we accepted but did not necessarily respond to. So they didn't affirm. So like essentially Stephen Covey is saying here, he didn't affirm those feelings. Accepted them, understood them, but didn't necessarily say that they were true or respond to them.
Sorry, if I could add something about that. Didn't necessarily respond to. So the son was reacting to all of that, and they handled it very well because they knew what their purpose was in acting the way they were acting. That's how they were able to be so firm in what they were doing. So they chose not to respond to how their son was reacting to this new way they were treating him, because they knew their purpose. And that's how they were so firm. If they didn't have a clear purpose in mind, then I would guess most likely they would be very wavering and not firm in the way their new approach, and maybe they would just falter very quickly.
Dude, yeah, it's actually way true. Knowing your purpose, seeing the problem correctly, creates that commitment that will last a long time. That's cool. Um, he says here again, going on, that the unspoken message was, "We don't need to protect you. You're fundamentally okay." As the weeks and months passed, he began to feel a quiet confidence and affirmed himself. He began to blossom at his own pace and speed. He became outstanding as measured by standard social criteria, academically, socially, and athletically, at a rapid clip, far beyond the so-called natural developmental process. As the years passed, he was elected to several student body leadership positions, developed into an all-state athlete, and started bringing home straight A report cards. He developed an engaging and guileless personality that has enabled him to relate in non-threatening ways to all kinds of people.
Wow.
That's powerful, dude. Just took off.
What were we saying before? We were talking about if you fix your character, then you will get far better outward results more consistently and much more abundantly than if you just focus on the outward results themselves and neglect your character. And this story literally just proved what
Yeah.
we were talking about.
It's like,
Have you read this book before?
maybe a little. Maybe once or twice. No, that's like really cool how if you want to make quantum leaps of improvement, change your paradigm and your character. But if you want to make little increments of improvement, then just work on your attitudes and behaviors. That's like essentially what that's saying there. I like this line here. It says, at a rapid clip, far beyond the so-called natural developmental process. I think that in our, especially in today's world, we have this like idea of how fast we progress. But like, how fast can we actually progress if we focus on the right thing? You know, like, I actually don't know like the answer to this question, but I am very, very interested and intrigued and curious about this so-called natural developmental process and like what that looks like and how we can like accelerate that. So I'll get back to you guys when I study that more.
Oh, please do.
But that's like super cool how he just blossomed in all areas of his life, not just one, but every single area in his life, all the ways that mean most. He won. He literally was able to achieve everything he wanted and won in the ways that matter most to him.
Sounds like he won privately and then had his public victory.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, but what do I know? Sandra and I believe that our son's quote-unquote socially impressive accomplishments were more a serendipitous expression of the feelings he had about himself than merely a response to social reward. This was an amazing experience for Sandra and me, and a very instructional one in dealing with our other children and in other roles as well. It brought to our awareness on a very personal level the vital difference between the personality ethic and the character ethic of success. The psalmist expressed our conviction as well. Search your own heart with all diligence, for out of it flows the issues of life.
Dang, dude.
Good stuff.
Search your own heart with all diligence, for out of it flow the issues of life. So many times we blame external factors, other people, like natural disasters, the weather, our teachers, our coworkers.
It's all you.
Like, we just blame other people, but this guy's saying that search your own heart with all diligence, for out of it flow the issues of life. That you literally have the capacity to influence your external circumstances if you just cleanse the vessel first. Now, that's going to be very, very painful and really hard. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be a sting involved in that, in becoming like humble enough and aware of like our shortcomings and like where we actually are, and like that we are where we are today because of the choices that we've made yesterday. But like, that's exactly what Stephen Covey is saying here, is like, yeah, it's a lot more work than the personality ethic, but we reap what we sow. And so because we're putting forth more work, we're going to get way more out of it. It's way more effective in the long run.
That the psalmist is implying no matter whose fault it is that you're in the situation you're in, it won't change until you take responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least it won't change in the direction you want it until you take responsibility for that. Something that stood out to me was they said that their experience with that child served as a pattern or a way to handle their next children. And I assume that because they already learned their lesson with this child, that raising their other children was a lot more natural, a lot more clear, and a lot fewer roadblocks. And for example, that's the way I took while learning a language. I figured if I could just get it right the first time and make sure that I had the fundamentals down, then much later, like mastering certain fundamentals will just make everything else not only much more natural, but like correct and naturally, right? So they fixed the problem early on so that for the rest of their kids, they didn't struggle. So that's really cool.
It was a lot easier.
Well,
Like they got the fundamentals down first.
Yeah. Once they got the fundamentals, which was hard for them, everything else was easy. And it was easy and it was right. So that's the cool part about mastering your character and the fundamentals.
Dude, yeah, that's super cool. I played on a soccer team that was like at a state level. Like we like won state cup multiple years, and every year our coach would bring us back to the basics, to the fundamentals. At the beginning of the year, he'd be like, "All right, we're gonna start just passing it," and like we're all thinking like, "Why are we doing this? Like this is ridiculous." Like we know how to pass the ball, you know. But he was just like drilling into us like the importance of the fundamentals. Now, if we don't have those down, we can't move on to more advanced stuff. And so the personality ethic, like it's good. It's good to have those skills and those techniques and those talents, but we just need to govern it by the character ethic. That's where like the true change will happen in our lives. And once we master the character ethic, then we can add the personality ethic on top of it. And then that's when we'll really start becoming powerful people and really start getting a lot of security, guidance, wisdom, and power, which we'll go into later. But guys, this stuff works. I promise. I've seen it in my life the past 2 years as I've been studying this, and it works. So we're gonna go more into how this works just throughout these podcasts and episodes, but like really try and become more aware of yourself and like where you're actually at. And believe me, like this will create massive impacts in your life and those around you, and you win in the ways that matter most in all areas of your life. So
agree. I'm finding out more about it as well as I go on. The more I do it, the more sure of it I become. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Dude, yeah, of course. Good having you.
Cool. Enjoy it while it lasts.
Appreciate it, dude.
Never gonna do this again.
Yeah, right. Of course you are. Okay. Love you guys. Have a good night.